afternoon, and welcome to the first panel of the day. I think the discussion amongst the four panelists will be a little bit different as they each represent a project or organization that is not as traditionally related to DePIN in some cases. So that will be one of the central themes of the panel today. I'm going to introduce each panelist, and then they're going to give you a quick 1-minute spiel on their project or their company and why they're here today. So to my right, I have Paksy, who's the Chief Strategy Officer of Staex. Next, we have RG, founder and CEO of Reppo. And then we have Joel Thorstensson, representing both 3Box Labs and Ceramic. And finally, Matthew Fontana, head of ecosystem of Streamer. So thank you all for joining us today here in Berlin. And Paksy, I'll start with you. Tell us a little bit about Staex.
Thanks, John. I'll give you an example. Yesterday, we had more than 100 people gather, and part of our partners, if you're interested in actual applied industry blockchain Web3 tools usage, we're working with Vantage Towers that operate 84,000 telco towers. We're working with Rewe Group, the beloved Rewe Group. I'm sure you do groceries. We're working with their payment tools. And so we're building large projects based on Web3 tools, but for industry. And I'm all about market adoption, so I invite you all to talk to me if you have, ingenious Web3 tools for us to play with. Thank you.
Thank you, Paksy. Hand it over to you, RG.
Thanks, John. So I'm RG, the co-founder and CEO of Reppo. Reppo is a risk and reputation modeling network. So we started out with solving DePIN verification, which was, Tom mentioned this in his talk earlier, but really the challenge of understanding the behavior of different nodes. Our thesis is that if you're able to understand the behavior of nodes on a network, you're able to claim that you have a metric for the quality of the network. So that's really what we're trying to do. For us, the vision is a bit broad. DePINs is our first go-to-market, but we're kind of focusing on risk and reputation broadly in the world, thinking about AI systems. So as the Reppo protocol, we're in the incentive layer that is incentivizing people and world to think about risk and reputation in our decisions that we make on a daily basis.
Thank you, RG. We'll move on to Joel.
Hello. So the project I'm working on is called Ceramic. It's a decentralized data network. And one of the main things it enables is you to create these mutable objects that are version controlled. They're tamper resistant, cryptographically signed, and are sort of independently verifiable. And what that means is essentially we can have a lot of these objects in a global namespace without having to have global consensus over everything that's going on. And everything is sort of still shared over a peer-to-peer network.
Thanks, Joel. And finally, Matthew, tell us a little bit about Streamer.
Streamer is a peer-to-peer decentralized data streaming protocol. So you can stream any kind of data to any number of subscribers, all in real time, all through this peer-to-peer mesh created by the users and devices of the network. So it is useful for DePIN projects especially, and AI as well as live media streaming as well. So those are the three verticals that we're really targeting.
Great. Thanks all four of you for introducing what you're working on. We're going to launch into about 9 or 10 questions, some group questions and some individual ones. However, if anybody in the audience thinks of a question while we're up here, don't hesitate to raise your hand, and we'll give you a chance to ask any of the four of them something that's on your mind. So I'm going to start with Matthew. Tom launched the DePIN Day Berlin this morning by giving his definition of DePIN, which is not even a year old or so as an acronym for what we're working on. But Matthew, to you and Streamer, what's DePIN, and how is it distinguishing itself within the Web3 marketplace?
Yeah, I think that DePIN is, it's been said before that it's a new name on an old thing, kind of, and that's fine. But
what's the old thing?
old thing is kind of all crypto projects have these same themes and actors, and there's a token, and there's some sort of coordination, and so on and so on. But what probably differentiates DePIN projects is the role of the community and the active nature of the sort of workers in the system. So there are, all sorts of different projects that have communities. And those communities are very important to those projects, but with DePIN, the community is the infrastructure, it is the project. So they live and die off that active role of the contributor. So, yeah.
And in the case of Streamer, how would you clarify participation and incentivization? I mean, could someone in the audience here just randomly start participating in the Streamer network and be incentivized?
Yeah, they can join the network. It's decentralized. You can, it's totally trustless, and you can kind of use it for your own needs, and it works off the principle of reciprocity. But where the incentive layer comes in is that you have the ability to sponsor infrastructure to join. So kind of like hiring a backbone to your network. And so if you want to participate in that kind of process, then you will need to kind of run a node, and that relay node has the promise of staking tokens and basically promising that they will be open and online and kind of do honest, good work. And so, yeah, similar process in most crypto projects. You do your job well, you get the carrot, and if you do it wrongly, you get the stick. So, yeah, that's how it works at Streamer.
And carrots or sticks working better for Streamer?
Carrots are good for everybody. Yeah, we don't like to use the stick.
Fair enough. Thanks, Matthew. I'm going to move over to Joel, who again is working on the project Ceramic. Joel, why should builders and developers use these DePIN solutions versus building it themselves, using a status quo Web 2 project or something else? Why, and what are some of the reasons? Minimizing risk? Is it just about incentivization?
Yeah, so I guess on using DePIN in general, to me it seems like there's two different things that you would want to do that. One is just cheaper and better, which might be the case for some DePIN networks. Some DePIN networks might not be the case. I think there's probably a spectrum. I think the other reason is that you want your users to have more sovereignty, either if that's from an ideological perspective, or if that's actually a requirement for your application. And I think that the third thing of a requirement for your application is probably the reason why many are here and why all this is super interesting.
Understood. So participation can make it cheaper, better, faster for some individual developers.
Well, I mean, I think in some cases the DePIN network might have been constructed so that in certain use cases it's cheaper and better. But I think in some cases the DePIN network might actually be slower than a Web 2 alternative, but still provide other types of benefits when it comes to the sovereignty of the users interacting with the protocol, such that that might actually be a requirement for an application to function at all. And so there's probably between those things, different developers might select different reasons for why they need to use DePINs.
RG wants to jump in.
I think it's also important for us to not only look at end users, which are just people who are using the 5G or using the solar and the developers. I think using the supply side as the users is important here. And the reason I say that is, when we look at a network like Fluence, right, they're trying to bring unused hardware that is kind of just staying, is currently latent to the network. So the supply side is also a user in this case. And the second thing is these are new markets. So what we're seeing, especially with things like Filecoin, is there's a company called Specs.website, which is enabling a brand new secondary market for people to trade miner IDs. And so if it's worth anything, at least the finance people are coming in and bringing liquidity. So it's a product for them, and it's a brand new market. And I think it's important to acknowledge that, as of course we want to replace current systems and disrupt current systems, but I think just expanding our thinking about who the users are, I think is helpful as we like wrap our heads around DePINs.
Can you actually give me an example, like the best example that you guys have where like a participant that contribute really is benefiting from these networks? Like what would in the world be the best example of this?
Like someone who's contributing and benefiting?
Yeah.
Like I can tell you, like, I was at Filecoin for 2.5 years, and the early people who joined the Filecoin network as storage providers, some of them have done really, really well for themselves. And they have gone on to, build businesses, supporting other networks beyond storage. And so I think I would...
Later on as well, like the whole network benefits, not just the top?
Yeah, because definitely the whole network benefits, because I think what you have right now is, well, Filecoin is moving, I'm just using the Filecoin as an example, like Filecoin is moving now to FVM. Like for all those things to happen on Filecoin, you needed, for the initial players to come in. And so I think that, I wouldn't just say that the users of Filecoin are only the people storing the data and the developers building using FVM. I think the users of Filecoin are also the storage providers who mine block rewards, right? So I think it's really important to acknowledge that.
No, I'm glad you brought that up because, attached to this question is, do we all care about a fair distribution of economic rents? So maybe some people in the audience think more about macroeconomics rather than the technology. I'm one of them. And I think one of the benefits of DePIN is the possibility to have a fair distribution of economic rents, rather than just Visa or Facebook, Meta, Google taking the lion's share of the economic rent that flows through a centralized system. Here we all have a chance to change it, right? And my 2 cents, though, hearing what they were talking about is, I heard early contributors to Filecoin did well. Early contributors to the Helium network did phenomenal. But after a year or two, they didn't do so well.
That's
so
my
I think
point.
the DePIN industry faces this challenge. How can you, for instance, create a token economic design that fairly distributes over time, not just to the early contributors who maybe have insider information, got their hands on the first device, et cetera, right?
So guys, I totally believe you contribute, you need to be compensated, right? At whatever level. We go about it slightly differently. We would like to work with corporations, build a network for them, and then invite, for example, yesterday we launched a drone. We work with German drones. We were connecting with the machine. Right now, we still use a payment tool that uses real euros. Next step would be tokenization. But hear me out. Connect with the machine, whatever task that drone needs to perform. For example, I need data over this certain location, right? You have a drone, you can fire up your drone, land a drone, get paid, right? Landing fee, takeoff fee, data, storage fee on a blockchain, all that good stuff. But if we don't have industry and government embrace some of the stuff we're doing, it's going to stay with, a few good guys trying to have this, vision of the world, and in the end, it falls flat. So I would really like to drive forward this, like I don't want to kumbaya, but let's join hands, because that's what the community is about, right? In the end, we want this community. So we have expertise, but you guys have expertise. Can we find a way, especially while we're in Berlin, to do some of this stuff together? Because once we have this network for industries, we can invite anyone to come on that network and say, okay, what can you do well, and what is your contribution, and how do we then compensate you?
So Paksy has actually just answered the question I was going to ask her, which was,
I'm so passionate about
why do system builders and dApp developers need DePIN ecosystems? So maybe I'll change it a little bit. So I think you just stated that Staex itself is not building out a DePIN, but wants to offer its services and systems to others that wish to. So
Right.
Besides the drones, can you give us another example of an institution, whether it be regulatory or a for-profit company, that Staex has provided the infrastructure for a DePIN and how it's gone?
So right now we're working with Vantage Towers, as I mentioned. So they would like to collect weather data, sell weather data. They'd like to do electromagnetic fields around their towers. Because as you can imagine, guys, all these telco towers are super expensive in maintaining, right? They need to do reporting to the EU. And we don't want a situation like Volkswagen where people can go in and change these values. So they are looking into Web3 tools. How can Web3 tools make us money or save us money on these really expensive land that we own, on these expensive towers we need to maintain? The more we can help industry and governments, right, in, yes, making money, the more they will embrace it, the more they will have opportunities to then, I call it, I know people don't like to hear this, Web 2.5, because there's still Euro involved, but then we slowly can move towards tokenization. And then I think the community can benefit, because if you're part of the network, you can write some smart, whatever, dApps or whatever, and say, hey, guys, I made this, can you use this? And this is maybe not for everybody, but it's truly what we need. Look, we had the Staatssekretär Wirtschaft, Energie und Betriebe yesterday at our event. They are willing to listen, but let's work together.
That's a step in the right direction. I'm not sure all regulatory bodies are so willing to listen to those who are advocating for decentralization. But I think all of us are starting to see it slowly change, right? All right, RG, sorry. Talk a little bit about the challenges that data exchanges and connectivity layers such as Reppo are facing. And dual part, second question is, what are you bullish about with Reppo? And do you all like to say trust or trustless in your system description?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'll try to tackle the second one first. So I think kind of, what was just said. I think a big component about scaling like DePIN networks or crypto networks in general is helping folks outside this room really understand risk and reputation, because that's what it comes down to, right? A policymaker wants to know, Gary Gensler wants to know, like, what is the risk and how is this going to impact, someone's reputation? And I think this idea, a lot of the times people mix up this notion of trustlessness and with like getting rid of subjectivity and trying to be objective. And I think at Reppo, we don't believe in that. We think that the idea of trustlessness is very different from the idea of being objective. Because at the end of the day, if you're operating in this world, if you're living in society, you are inherently subjective. And I think we need to build systems like Reppo, which, just to give you an example, so Reppo is building like a network. So the best way to think about it is an incentivized layer like Hugging Face, but specifically focused on risk and reputation models. And we actually have a data exchange within Reppo. So the way the data exchange works is if anyone in this room today wants to build a small model, we're not talking about LLMs, we're talking about small, like you can talk about like small language models or small models which are specifically designed to do one thing. So let's say you want to know the behavior of Filecoin nodes in Germany. That's the only thing you're interested in, because you're working with constraints that were mentioned, that people want to store data within Germany, regulatory reasons. So now you are trying to understand who are the best nodes of Filecoin within Germany. There is a model that someone will build. So now to build this model, you need data and data sets. The data is needed to guide your heuristics, and the data set is needed to, of course, train the model. So the data exchange that we're building is, think of it like an order book. If you're a modeler, you should be able to come to Reppo, order the data that you want, put a bid, and then basically get the data. And for us, that's how we think about trustlessness. Trustlessness.
So that's where you go to trustlessness.
Yeah.
You don't want participants or users to trust.
No, I think there is a very close connection between trustlessness and verifiability. And I think what we have seen so far is that we just...
So which is it? Is it verifying?
Yeah.
Or is it trustlessness?
I think it's verifiability plus subjectivity is equal to trustlessness. I think what we have done so far is we have just said, hey, all the transactions are on chain, so it's trustless. That's not true.
Yep.
Right? Like the average person in this room isn't going to go and query the chain to prove it's trustless. I think what you need is an intermediary, a consumable metric, so to say, that you can take to a policymaker, you can take to a client, you can take to a storage provider, and say, hey, this is what it is, and it's verifiable. And I think that's what we really think about.
Got it. All right. For this next question, for all four of you, a raise of your hand is all that's required. Are all of you using blockchain or some other type of decentralized technology? I think that's
I even have crypto.
4 for 4 there on using blockchain. But there are a lot of projects that use different types of decentralized technology, right? So an easy one. Okay, Matthew, back to you. Multiple choice question, or you could weave in the answers. Where do DePINs provide the most value? Intra-network exchange, financial incentivization of participants, providing trustless systems, or maybe is it for the speculators in the audience who are really curious about the value of the token incentivization of your network?
I think it depends on who you ask.
Well, I'm asking you, I suppose, and by you, streamer.
Well, I guess with my streamer hat on, I would say that actually it's the financial incentives. And why I say that is that perhaps from kind of my personal beliefs coming through here, that if you can put a pipeline directly from the workers to the incentives, that is the big win, removing those middlemen. If we can accomplish this through decentralized technologies that handle the coordination and the operation of the network and kind of export value, while at the same time we kind of have that very direct, simple path of incentives to work, then
Yep,
yeah, we
understood.
win. Yeah.
And I would say of the 4 projects on stage, yours is by far the most mature.
Absolutely.
How many nodes run the streamer network today?
There are, I think, maybe 1 to 2,000-ish. Now, we used to have...
It's a big spread, 1 to 2,000.
Well, it's a decentralized network, and decentralized networks are actually very difficult to observe.
Sure, so some are on and some are off. Yeah, okay.
If you get a very sharp answer, you know they're kind of fluffing. Yeah, we have quite a large network. It used to be actually much larger when it was actually semi-centralized, and what we found was that when we made it more efficient, and perhaps going back to the earlier talk about Pocket Network, they noticed that drop in nodes, and that was actually from an efficiency improvement. So sometimes bigger is not always better.
Yep.
And if the nodes are kind of doing their job well, then you may need less of them.
No, thanks for the answer. And just as a kind of wrap up to my question, I can participate in Streamer?
Yes, you can.
Great, and because this is going to lead into my question to Joel, how much do I have to pay out of pocket for the hardware node to participate in Streamer? What's the cost to me?
If you have a Raspberry Pi or even your laptop, you can run the node on that. Otherwise, you can do what a lot do and kind of use cloud providers to, and that's a few dollars a month, and APYs at the moment are about 40 to 50%. So it's
fair enough. And
easy.
The average node operator grosses how many euros per month?
Depends on how much they stake on the sponsorship. So it works based on that relationship. So if you have a lot of euros, then you'll get a lot of euros, and that's
so fair enough. So for all of you who have an extra 300 euros, apparently you can go get a Raspberry Pi set up and start a node on Streamer, and you can calculate your return on investment by figuring out how many tokens you want to stake in, right?
Come see me and I'll tell you how many.
Or come talk to Matthew after the talk, great. So Joel, how has the incentivization models worked so far? I understand what you're working on is brand new and has not yet launched an incentivization model. So maybe the question is, what do you all plan to do? What type of model is Ceramic going to introduce to the world for someone like me or someone in the audience to join?
Right, so well, to the question in general, what types of incentivization models have worked, I think the ones we really know are working is just blockchains that are producing blocks and sort of the applications on top of that. I think it's interesting that that's pretty narrow, and like the types of things that people have been dreaming up is like extremely wide. And so, it would be interesting to see like in a couple of years when we see some of these like mechanisms becoming more mature. As for ceramic specifically, we sort of think of it in a few different ways. So one thing is that we don't want to create like a monolithic network where you come and like there's only one way to run a node. We actually want, sure, there to be some incentive for people to run node and host public data in the network, but we also want the ability for like end users to run nodes that even like run locally in their browser or on their computer, so that they don't have to like necessarily reveal all their data that they're creating, and then maybe be able to like selectively disclose that data to other people. So that's sort of the end goal that we are shooting for. So we don't want to incentivize all of the data, because if someone is incentivized to sort of make your private data public, that wouldn't be very nice.
Yeah, fair enough. So it sounds like a possible two-pronged approach where investing in some hardware and joining the network could be incentivized, but also picking and choosing what data is going through your node to expose to the network could be a second way to incentivize.
Yeah, I think that mode of like selecting what data is on your node, or you as a data producer selecting which nodes have access to your data. On a different perspective, like one thing that I think is interesting about Ceramic is that you have end users producing data that is cryptographically signed by keys that users control. And so one thing that we think about being useful, not necessarily for Ceramic as a network directly, but for people building applications and then just like leveraging data that exists on the network, they can look at the network and a bunch, like graph of contributions of users, and potentially use that data as a way to reward their users.
Yeah, thank you. All right, one last question for the panelists, and I think we're going to wrap it up here. So this is a bit of a softball, as we like to say in America. I'll translate that for the German audience. That means it's an easy question. That's all right. What is your favorite DePIN project outside of your own? And I'll start. Mine is called Bitcoin. You might have heard of it. I think there's a very strong argument it's the original and most successful DePIN, but up for argument. But Paksy, yourself.
And it's truly decentralized.
Bitcoin?
Yes.
100%.
Exactly. Compared to many others, right?
Agreed.
We, like I said, are agnostic.
One answer. What's your favorite DePIN?
Chirp Wireless.
Okay. RG?
For me, it's going to be Prime Intellect. Yeah, it's an intelligence network.
Prime Intellect. Okay. Joel?
I'm going to have to go with the classic BitTorrent. Not the new thing with the token, but
okay.
like the network that people are actually using.
The original BitTorrent where you got all your music and movies from back in the
I only
2000s?
download Linux ISOs.
Fair enough. And finally, Matthew.
Demo, yeah.
Demo.
Special place in my heart because they actually started as a grant from Streamer, so yeah.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah.
So thanks to all our panelists for joining. Thanks to DePIN Day Berlin and Fluence for having us up here.